with particular pride, very stubborn, very beautiful, very hard-earned, that comes from being Igbo. For others, it's something else that comes to mind. Headlines about insecurity, unknown gunmen, abandoned white elephant federal projects, brilliant young people, engineers, doctors, designers, all living for Lagos, living for Abuja, for London, for Canada, and most importantly, not coming back. Here's what I know about us. The Igbos are among the most highly educated ethnic groups in Nigeria. We have one of the highest concentration of PhDs per capita on this continent. We've built 350 industries in Aba, almost entirely without government support. We survived a war designed to break us, and we came back. We came back trading within 2 years. So for us in the Southeast, education is not just a policy. It is inheritance. Our grandparents sold lands to send children to schools. Our parents worked multiple jobs so we could go to universities. Our parents had zero savings. So that when an Igbo parent says, I want you to get an education, they're not making a suggestion. They are passing something on. And yet, over 60% of university graduates in Nigeria cannot find formal employment, including those who graduated with first-class honors. The curriculum in most Southeast secondary schools was designed by people who are no longer alive. We have primary school children being taught by teachers who haven't received professional training since 2004. We have universities whose syllabi haven't been updated since before a smartphone existed. And here's the part that should disturb all of us. The most talented young Igbo people, the ones who figure it out, are increasingly figuring it out despite their schooling, not because of it. The Garage, a homegrown Southeast company built in Nsukka, right in the UNN campus, just released the State of Students Work Report 2026, the most comprehensive study ever done on students' digital work and the future of talent in Nigeria. They surveyed over 4,000 students across 55 institutions in 29 states. What they found should change this conversation permanently. 2 out of 3 Nigerian students are already working, already building, already earning while in school. 80% of working students have more than 2 years of professional experience before graduation. Nearly half of them contribute financially to their families, paying what they call black tax while still learning. Let that sink in. This generation is not waiting. They are already inside the economy. They're already carrying families. They already have portfolios and clients and work histories before they receive one certificate. And the system that was supposed to prepare them, the system they have sacrificed for, argued for, fought for, largely has nothing to do with why they are succeeding. So what are we doing? Tonight, we're not here to complain. Alibo, we do not need to sit and lament about what is broken. We sit and build what is better. We are here to think hard, honestly, and out loud about what it will take to build an education system that is worthy of Alibo's ambitions. One that does not just produce graduates, but builds people. One that does not only teach for WAEC, for NECO, but teaches for the world. One that does not leave my brothers and sisters in Ebonyi, where I'm from, behind. And one that sees the child with special needs. One that reaches the girl in the rural community who has never, ever been inside a tech hub. We are going to challenge some ideas tonight that deserve to be challenged. We are going to name some uncomfortable truths that people with power prefer to avoid. We're going to ask questions that do not have easy answers, because easy answers are how we got here. This is Afia Talks, and tonight we are rethinking education. To join me in this very interesting expose are some of the brightest and the most incredible minds in the Southeast, my brothers and my sisters. And it's very important that we understand that the conversations we're going to have this night is coming from the place of unvarnished truths. We've brought some of the brightest minds, and we're going to explore how we're thinking about education in the Southeast. But before we go deep tonight, ladies, gentlemen, and my folk joining me on Zoom, I want us to do something unusual with this introduction. I don't want you to give me your full CV. Just tell us your name, tell us what you do, and more importantly, as part of your introduction, tell me what you believe the single biggest obstacle to great education in Southeast Nigeria is. One sentence. Go. Raymond, I'll start with you.
I was hoping you wouldn't. My name is Raymond Chuma Onwoku. I primarily, I carry water for the most talented young people on Nigerian university campuses. The other question was, what do I
believe is the single biggest obstacle?
The single biggest obstacle? That's a very difficult question. Infrastructure. I think that enough said, infrastructure.
Okay, infrastructure. We're going to establish this while we have our conversation. We also have Joy joining us via Zoom. Joy, tell us just quickly, who you are, what you do, and more importantly, what the single biggest obstacle to great education in Southeast Nigeria is. Yeah, Joy, we can hear you. Joy? Okay, so while we're trying to fix that, Uche, do you want to go next, please?
Absolutely. My name is UcheChukwu Agbo. I'm originally from Ebonyi State. I live in Nigeria. I also live in Dallas, Texas, in the US. I work with young people across different parts of Africa to raise a new generation of leaders who will be responsible leaders across different parts of Africa. Currently, we are doing lots of work in Nigeria. This year, we are expanding to West and Central Africa. By next year, we are doing the whole of Africa.
Amazing. What do you believe is the single greatest obstacle to education in Southeast?
I think it's the fact that we are still asking the question of what would you want to be when you grow up, instead of which problem would you want to solve when you grow up.
Okay.
I think that's the biggest problem.
So first principles are going to the fundamentals. Tracy?
Hi. My name is Tracy. I am a school leader. I work in business development and I run an inclusive school. So we take care of special needs children and children at their foundational years. That's from when they're babies practically till when they're 11. And I believe that the biggest challenge that we face in the Southeast is the lack of awareness of people to what children really need foundationally.
I like that. Joy, if you're back, Joy, please could you give an intro and tell us what you believe foundationally is the biggest problem of education in the Southeast?
Okay, confirm you can hear me now.
Hi, yes, Joy, we can hear you.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. My name is Joy Ukwe, and I'm the lead project manager for the just concluded EdTech Festival. And yes, the biggest challenge I see in our education system is the structure, an organized structure, is what I'm thinking. So I'll leave it at that to develop more.
Thank you so much, Joy. Thank you so much. And last but definitely not the least, we have Alex Onyia. Mr. Alex, please could you do a quick intro and tell us what you believe is the greatest problem for education in the Southeast?
Thank you so much, everyone, for having me. My name is Alex Onyia. I work with Educare. The problem with education in the Southeast is at different verticals, but at its foundation, the biggest problem is neglect. We've neglected education for a long time, and it actually mean multiplied a lot. So one of the things we critically need to do is to bring back core focus and attention. Education requires a lot of attention and care, and we need to bring it back. And once we get that right, a lot of things will start fixing itself.
Thank you so much, Alex. And I see you're doing a lot to get that right for us. And it's something I would want us to also discuss while we get into. So let's get into it. And Raymond, I'll start with you because I want you to be my anchor, my data person, because a lot of the conversations we're doing revolve around some of the data. Because you and your team did something unusual, Raymond. You didn't just guess about what is happening in the Southeast. You didn't guess about what was happening in the educational system. You asked over 4,000 respondents. You went to 55 institutions. I saw the journey. I saw at some point you're in Maiduguri as well, in the heat of things that are happening. And you published what they said. So tell us, not the headline statistics that sounds good, in press releases that you've put out, but what genuinely shocked you in that report? Because you've worked with young people. In fact, the report typically embodies what you did as a student, because you were working while you were in UNM back in the day, and now you have done a report to back that. But I want to start with an opening salvo. What was the thing that shocked you the most when you read this, when you saw the report and what the insights it gave?
So first, yeah, a lot of the things that we learned in the course of this research was consistent with the initial hypothesis that we've made. I think the biggest divergence from what we hoped or what we expected to see in the report was how much the impact of student excellence extended outside of the shores of the campus. One of the examples is the data on black tax. So it's one thing to say that students are doing really well for themselves in their small capacity as students. And sometimes people consider the things that students do remarkable, not because it is objectively remarkable, but because it is remarkable in the context of being a student and achieving this. What we learned was that even outside of being students, as individuals, these people contributed meaningfully to the outside economy, not just to their immediate families, but to how they participated as consumers in the larger Nigerian economy. And I found that really interesting because we thought that most of the exceptionalities of student behavior was restricted to the context of their being students and not just like, larger, the larger economy.
Yeah. So still on that report, I think something I want you to tell the audience, because 2 out of 3 Nigerian students are already engaged in digital work and entrepreneurship. 80% more have more than 2 years of work experience before they even graduate. There is a structure called Sideways that typifies how people in school can still work. That's how I joined Genesis in 2017. But what does that number tell us, the numbers from the report? What does that tell us about the state of education and the economy of the Southeast? Is this a case of necessity being the mother of invention? You have to feed the family. You left home to feed home. So instead of focusing on school, you had to do 1 or 2 things. And once you're done with it, I want you to also answer this from your experience as well. But Raymond, over to you.
As much as we argue that education is important, I think that there is an intrinsic value to education regardless of the outcomes that it is able to create for you. And as much as we agree, we also need to agree that most young people, most parents send their kids to school with the expectation or the hope that their education is going to lead to economic outcomes.
So some sort of investment.
Precisely, it's an investment.
Okay.
So to that extent, when most young people look at themselves, they ask themselves if this part of education is able to repay those returns, like to make those returns on investment.
Yeah.
I think that especially from the qualitative conversations we had with students, it was clear that the lack of optimism that this part of education would end up with me having a life that gave me the outcomes that I expected when I enrolled was a big motivator for why they started indulging in multiple other things. So it was, this investment is not going to be repaid unless I get creative. I need to get creative unless I'm going to be part of the majority. The majority in this instance is the hundreds of thousands of young unemployed people who consistently burden the system across the board upon graduation.
Yeah.
And I think that was the single biggest motivator.
For people.
Yeah.
Uche, do you want to add on this? But I think for me, is that not a fundamentally broken system that people are not, going to study things because, this is the passion I have to solve this particular problem. The problem you're solving in quotes is generational poverty, for instance. You want to be the person that stops that. And the educational system does not fit into that. Uche, from your experience as, a young man that had to work his way through school, can you just give a little bit context, that a lot of the black tax people are doing because they have to work while in school to send back money home. You can study geology and for a fact you won't get a job as a geologist after 4 years. So you want to start early now because it means what you're learning there does not matter. So does that mean it's a half-baked geologist that's going to be a digital marketer that comes out at the end of the system? Do you want to weigh in on that?
Yes. First of all, let's establish that working while in school is not unique to Nigeria alone.
Okay.
It's done everywhere in the world.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, in America, if you're an undergraduate student, you're expected to work. They have a program that they call work and study.
Yeah.
And it's not the kind of work and study we have in Nigeria. You actually enrolled as a full-time student
Mm-hmm.
while still working.
Yeah.
So that's not unique to Nigeria alone.
Okay.
But the reason for which they are working may be different. Because while they are working just to sustain themselves in school, in the case of Nigeria, we are working to send money home. And let's not delay that door with words here.
Okay.
A poor person is a desperate person. A hungry man is not a logical person,
Mm-hmm.
right? If someone is hungry, the greatest imperative the person has is food. So if someone is poor, that individual doesn't have the luxury of thinking about some of the other more complex problems
Yeah.
that people in other parts of the world think about, right? They need to solve the problem of poverty, the problem of hunger,
Yeah.
before they can now begin to talk about solving global related issues.
So in that Maslow's pyramid,
Absolutely, we are
smack down at the bottom.
120 million Nigerians are living below the poverty line. When you have that kind of massive number of people living in poverty, you don't expect a young person to go to school and begin to study courses that will not produce some kind of return on the investment. And that also goes back to the thing I said at the beginning. One of the greatest challenges we have is that because of this poor state of things, our young people are having to focus on answering the question of what would you want to be when you grow up,
what you're going to
instead of which problem are you going to solve. And for the few who are asking the question of which problem are you going to solve, the answer is poverty. They want to pull their families out of poverty. And what pulling their families out of poverty mean can be very different for an African kid compared to someone who lives in a place like Europe, Western Europe, for instance, who has access to stable electricity, access to clean water. This guy sleeps on the floor every night. So for that person, poverty means something entirely different. So I think that it's something that is interconnected.
Okay.
The fact that Nigeria and Southeast particularly, and other parts of Nigeria are living in abject poverty also incentivizes that way of thinking that you just described, where the average young person going into school is going just to survive, not necessarily to solve big
But
problems.
sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
What does that mean for the educational system? Like, if I get poverty is a hinderer, so what does that mean for professionalism? Like, so if I'm not going to school because I know that I'm able to solve a problem with this course I'm taking, I'm trying to look for other skills. And Raymond, I'm sure from your report, a lot of these jobs were ancillary jobs, not based on what they're studying in school. So does that mean that our people that are coming out from these things after studying these courses are not coming out as true professionals? Just give me, like, in 2 sentences, what the poverty means for the quality of people we bring out that are not able to focus on these things, because that's not a path towards solving the poverty problem.
First of all, let me establish that every course you study can help you solve the problem of poverty.
Okay.
If you are solving problems, resources will always gravitate towards you. So what we need to do in our education system, you asked what does it mean for education system?
Yeah.
I think it means we need to rethink the way we look at problems. We also need to rethink the way we prepare our students. We need to prepare them with the consciousness of solving the problems that exist in their communities. Because when they solve those problems, they can as well solve the problem of poverty. Resources gravitate towards value.
Okay, that makes sense. Still on this, the learning, earning thing, where what you're learning translates to earning. Raymond, just to set context for this, your report shows that 61% of student workers earn less than 100,000 naira a month, which is $50, $55 monthly while they are working. So these people are working, they have skills, they are building real things, solving problems around them, but they are not earning proportionately. You talked about work and study in America. My elder brother lectures in Rowan engineering, and during his early PhD time, I think it was like $36,000 or $40,000 they gave him to study. So there's a little bit of proportionality in it. So what is that gap between what students are learning, either inside the classroom or outside the classroom, and what is being rewarded by the economy actually? And specifically, do you feel that gap is wider in the Southeast?
So I don't think it's a learning and earning gap. I think it's a national economic gap.
Okay.
There is a significant divide between the amount of effort you put in and the rewards that we get out of it. Whether we think of it from the perspective of skill, how skilled am I and what kind of skilled labor am I doing versus how am I earning? Or we think about it from the perspective of time, how many hours am I putting into this over the period of a week, and what do I make back? I think that there's a disproportionate gap in what those realities look like, not just in the country, but especially when you compare it with neighboring countries like Ghana, even or South Africa.
Yeah.
But I think that when we narrow it down to students, the more impressive thing for me is that these earning patterns are consistent with the larger public. So even with all the points of friction that we identified with the report, students were able to earn as much on average as the average Nigerian. And I think that this is an excellent conversation to have now, because 2 days ago, PiggyVest released the most recent state of
Earnings.
savings report, as they describe it. And what it shows again is that most Nigerians earn, only 1% of Nigerians earn up to ₦1,000,000. That is $600. What that tells us is that when we look at our own research, it also shows that students earn along those same patterns. So I feel like the conversation would probably be more valuable if we extended to say, why does this gap exist as a community? But then the question you asked is if this is more predominant in the Southeast compared to other parts of the country.
And you can give me an example for it.
All right. So the answer to that is that I don't know. The opinion I have on that is that it probably is compared to the benchmark. So when you think of like the gap between effort and earnings, it feels like the benchmark is the strong economic hubs like say Lagos and some parts of the Southwest. So the challenge that the Southeast has is that it has a near consistent outflow of talent from its best talent-dense areas, university campuses. Every year, a few thousand Nigerian students graduate, so many of them really talented, and the vast majority of them are looking to leave. What this does is that it skews the data a bit, because those that are left are either those that do not have the leverage to be able to pursue better opportunities. And what this means is that because you have less leverage, you earn less. It means that what the data now looks like is that the ratio of effort to earning is significantly lower compared to those in those places. I think that what makes that the X factor that causes that difference is leverage. Our best, highest leverage talent move away to either out of the country to pursue better opportunities or to stronger economic hubs.
That makes sense. And Alex, I want you to weigh in on this, because I think we've had similar conversations around this in the past. With the work you've done at Educare, Alex typically says that some of his best talents in Educare that he has worked with for 10 years and more all came from the Southeast. But now they're in Lagos doing this state and they're doing it well. So, Alex, talk to me about this gap that exists between the brilliant minds here in the Southeast, the opportunities that do not exist for them here, and why it makes sense that they have to go to better places with opportunities. And is there anything that we can do? Is even discussing about stopping it, is that a proper thing to even explore? That let's stop people going to look for better opportunities outside because we want to grow a Igbo. Is there something fundamental and foundational we can do about this? If you can just weigh in, Mr. Alex.
I noticed something recently. I had some of my colleagues now that came from Enugu. They moved back to Enugu, right? So what they basically did was they migrated from Enugu, came to Lagos, saw the opportunity, made their mark, established their value, then relocated back to Enugu, because Enugu is a lot better place to live, a lot more affordable, a lot more convenient, connecting with families and a lot. So they now have the value. So they work remotely and they're working remotely in Enugu. And for us at this point, it's really not a problem because we've actually trusted them for a while. So we have started noticing that trend now with some of our colleagues now relocating back to Enugu and living Lagos. So, and I think that is what is going to happen to, probably it's already happening in a lot of companies in Lagos here. People may migrate, get the opportunity, establish their value, and then move back. And if you notice, I think migration in the East is increasing. If you notice recently, I think that may be the pattern. So stopping them is not necessary. Right now, they are in Enugu, they work remotely, they earn in several millions, they live a much comfortable life. All they need is just their desk and the internet. So if they never came to Lagos, or probably they migrate somewhere else, maybe they may not be able to easily access those opportunities. So what we can now do is, now that this is a trend, these are natural trends that started happening, because let's say somebody that earns 2 million in monthly in Enugu is 10 times better than somebody that earns 10 million monthly in Lagos.
Agreed.
Because in Lagos, money vanishes away. But in Enugu, there's a lot more power to whatever you. So I think that is the trend I'm seeing, and I believe a lot more companies probably will be experiencing that.
Yeah.
And we have to look at it and build around it. So the most important thing is that now you've left, we can build campaigns around it. Enugu is a lot more comfortable. Engineers are migrating back to Enugu, this and that. A lot of opportunities, I believe, will start even coming to Enugu at a scale never have seen before. Not just Enugu, Anambra, Abia. Look at Abia. Look at Aba. Abia State is now having like 18-hour. I mean, the worst people are having 18-hour uninterrupted light every day. But people are having 22 hours every single day. So by the time they probably start having their own airport, a lot more people will start migrating to Abia. Imo probably will be having their own experience. So I think a lot of things are changing. And one good thing about having talent from the East, which I've observed, like I mentioned to you the last time we spoke, one thing about having talent from the East is, or like Enugu specifically, I didn't talk about the rest, is they are not loud, but there's this natural form of reasoning and intelligence that comes with them. And they also have a longer staying power, because running a company, in as much as you can always hire people, but if you find good talent, you probably want to keep them a lot more longer than anything else. And you find that easily from the talent you see in Enugu. They may not be so loud. Some of them may not even be so good in expressing themselves at the early time of trying to hire them. But if you succeed, you just realize that you have very intelligent people who reason differently, who are willing to learn more. And by the time they touch whatever you do, you see that the difference is clear. So we can keep multiplying those kind of skill sets. Enugu is actually, I mean, the last time I was in Enugu, to be frank, which was like last month, Enugu is actually a lot more conducive than ever. I mean, I was already struggling. Should I go back to Lagos? So I think I felt this sense of fresh air.
Yeah.
The roads are easy. I mean, you can drive in Enugu for a month. Probably you'll not even see a single pothole. A lot of things are actually looking a lot more exciting, which is, to be frank, it wasn't like that before.
At all.
So these are the things that can encourage more people. In as much as I don't go out at night, some of the people around me, see that people are now freely going out at night. You know, those kind of things, bringing back the Sullivan energy a little bit more. So with that alone, when people now finally come to Enugu, I mean, some of my colleagues came for the first time in Enugu and they were like, wow, this Enugu is like an upgraded version of Abuja. Like they are comparing that it is more convenient to live in Enugu than even Abuja. You know, those kind of comparisons.
Yeah.
And I mean, Port Harcourt is like a village to Enugu and some of these things. So, and I believe that even somebody that was in Anambra the other day was like, Anambra is actually improving, in as much as Soludo may be messianic, but Anambra, like even the roads and the interconnections, Anambra is actually becoming quite impressive.
Yeah.
So, and I believe Abia is already on a good card. Ebonyi is somewhere I haven't been to in a long time, so I don't know how it looks like. And Imo State, I haven't been there for a long time, but I believe that if we can, now that we're having a lot more progressive states, attracting more people, attracting more companies, and attracting more talent will be a lot more exciting, and it's a lot more. So that's basically what I think.
That makes sense. Alex, thank you so much. And this is a conversation that myself and Alex have a lot of times around like the talent. And I think, Alex, I like the area you've come, because I didn't always think about the jab. I think it's called jabada, where you jabba and then you come back, where you have to go and get these things externally. And Uche, eventually you talk about this, the role of exposure in shaping the Southeastern mind, where you go out, talk about these things, and then come back, and you're able to give back. And Enugu, most importantly, has Okpa, which for me, I believe is, something that we should also always remember. It doesn't have traffic. I was in Lagos yesterday, up till this morning, and, I had to leave as early as possible to ensure that didn't stay. So it makes a lot of sense that people should go. We shouldn't try to do things from an emotional blackmail side that, you need to stay in the Southeast to grow the Southeast. We need to ensure that we have foundational systems that ensure that things happen here. Tracy, I want to come to you. because there's a foundational aspect that we want to talk about. You're Cambridge certified, you do inclusive pedagogy, and you've always done sustainable school design. So it's very common knowledge that the child is formed when they are young. In fact, the Bible says it's train up a child in the way they should grow so that when they grow up, they don't depart from it. Your work in foundational and primary education, my question is that, are we as a people over romanticizing the role of primary schooling in a country where so many people end up teaching themselves at the end of the day? What exactly does quality educational foundation, does for Nigeria? Like, what does it do for Nigerians? And, happy if you can also draw parallels with other systems that you've experienced. But what is the role? Like, when we are saying, oh, train this child well, take them to the best primary schools, what should they learn? What should we put in our foundational curriculums? And what role does it play for them when they grow up at the end of the day? Could you speak on that, please?
Okay, so I think that people really underestimate how important education is foundationally. I'm going to draw from what you said. You were saying something about the environment and poverty, how most people go to school on survival mode because they're trying to make money, But I feel like most of our societal problems can be fixed foundationally. For instance, in school, I'm going to refer to the British system a lot because I'm more familiar with it.
Okay.
For instance, in the British curriculum, for primary schools, they're teaching children about the wires that run beneath us, how power stations work, the people that work in power stations. Mm-hmm. So now in the future, let's say this person becomes a leader. And I would like to say anyone can become a leader. Most times in schools, we focus on, this person is getting first position. Okay. But truth is that if you look at some of our leaders these days, they definitely did not
get first position.
in school. Now, so they teach all these basic things to everybody. Oh, this is important. Power lines run beneath us. These people are very important for power. And then these children, they internalize these things and they see it as a normal thing. Like, this is what it should be.
Okay.
And this is how it should run. So when they get to that position in the future, even if they're corrupt as they may be, you won't hear news like, the dam stopped working because something broke and nobody fixed it. Because, even sitting here, I'm assuming all of us went to school here in Nigeria, primary school.
Yeah.
Yeah, we know that there's Kainji Dam. We know that there's Shiroro Dam. But what do we know about it?
I don't even know about the Shiroro Dam. You said it.
Do we even know who works there? Do we even know how it works? Or if there's a community of people that live around it? Then, secondly, I also talk about religious education. In Nigeria, we have more than one religion.
Yeah.
We have Christians, most traditionalists, so many people. So it surprises me that schools here actually teach IRS and CRS instead of...
IRS is Islamic?
Islamic,
okay.
And CRS...
It's Christian.
Instead of teaching religious education as a whole. Now, again, in the British system, where they live in such a diverse country that has Hindus, Sikhs, Christians, Muslims, in religious education or religion in school is approached differently. So, for instance, let's say the topic in religious education could be friendship.
Okay.
And then on this topic that is friendship, they talk about maybe the story of Jesus and his disciples. They draw a story from Islam, from Buddhism, from Hinduism. So these children, they have a wider worldview. Okay. So when they grow up and they actually have to live with these people from other religions and they form their own opinions, they're not thinking, oh, this person, why is this person wearing a scarf? Or why is this person doing this or celebrating this that I'm not doing? So I think, first of all, that's one thing that we don't think about in foundational education. And then secondly, most parents hope that their children will be the smartest in class and they'll be the best in science and math and English. But that's not the reality. As much as they're smart people, but then most people are just
there.
They're just normal. Not just there, but they're just normal. There's nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
So most people are just normal. People have special needs, people have learning disabilities. Some people are just better at other things than they are. in school. And then, but in our educational system, we don't really like take cognizance of that. We just focus mostly on, oh, we need to win this, or we need to pass math and science. We might not even focus on the other subjects,
Humanities and
you know.
stuff.
But when you look at, there's some very successful people that have learning disabilities in the Western world, and they have made it, like Tom Cruise. Do you know Tom Cruise has dyslexia?
The way he talks fast, I suspected, but I didn't know.
Keira Knightley has dyslexia. Albert Einstein has ADHD, had ADHD. Stephen Hawking's, he was. So, like, can you even imagine someone with a disability like Stephen Hawking's, how they would live in Nigeria? They wouldn't be given the room to achieve the kind of success that Stephen Hawking had achieved with his disability.
Tracy, sorry, I'm going to interrupt you there. But just two things that come up to mind that I didn't consider before is that religious tolerance can be taught foundationally, because I grew up in the North and I learned IRS. And, most times you see a Christian and you say, Arna, this person is an infidel. In fact, so your association with other religions is that, even in Christianity, die by fire, go to hellfire.
Yeah.
So it's already divisive from the foundational part. So there's a room where people growing up foundationally learn religious tolerance as a concept, yeah? Raymond, you want to weigh in on this?
So I think that this is one of those ideas that is excellent on paper.
Okay.
I think that the challenge with this is, by design, it sounds amazing, but the issue is that people's adherence to religion is tied to something that is ideological, right? And as a result of that, it involves a bit of irrational participation. So the contest.
Are you saying that religious people take out their brains, put it inside a box, and sell them? Just to confirm.
I wouldn't say that, because
Okay.
I did go to the seminar.
Are you, sorry, just also for establishment, you went to the seminary. What do you practice? Are you atheist?
I am Christian.
Are you a practicing Christian?
I am practicing.
Okay, please continue then.
So I realized that if you applied rationale and like logic to interrogate like Christian or religious institutions in general,
Yeah.
some of their ideals would fall. The problem I have with, I think we will experience if we try to do this, is that you'll be competing with parents who raise their kids believing these things, who send them to church and tell them these things. And I think that usually at those stages, regardless, even though they spend a ton of time in school and like they are heavily influenced by
It still defaults
their
back to their
teachers,
parents.
not just that they may default back to their parents, it is that you will experience pushback from their parents because you are teaching people who their parents believe these things. They believe die by fire. They believe those kinds of things. And the parents, there's always a running conversation as to what you can teach
My child.
kids, right?
I think it's normal to get pushed back when you want to make a change
To people's
Yeah.
children as well.
But at the end of the day, like even in our country, we would hope that we are governed by people that are more logical than sentimental.
That would just be a hope, wouldn't it?
Do you understand? No, but that's what we're talking about, rethinking education.
Fair point, fair
So
point.
yeah, we would hope that we're governed by people that think logically. Now we know that people in Nigeria, they take their religion very seriously. Sometimes I do too, But the truth is that we can't move forward, especially in a country that has mixed religions, until we take a different approach. Because you also have to make it clear to parents that you're not trying to indoctrinate their children. You're not teaching them you're not teaching a Christian child how to pray. And that's one thing with our current religious education, like it goes really deep, But in some other more developed countries, it's like you're just teaching them enough for them to respect other people. You're not trying to indoctrinate them or take it further than that. But here, religion just comes up so much in everything that we do.
It's cultural.
Cultural and
That
poverty is
it
like,
makes us forget that, we live with other people
yeah,
that may believe differently from us.
that makes sense. Uche, I want you to weigh in, please.
Okay, so let me start by saying that everything rises and falls on leadership.
Okay.
If we have a leadership that is interested in ensuring that we enjoy equity, fairness, and inclusivity in Nigeria, that will make these policies. And let's establish that if I do not know you, I'll be afraid of you. And if I'm afraid of you, I'll be willing to kill you because I see you as a threat. I grew up in Southeast Nigeria.
We grew up in the same place, my brother.
We grew up in the same place. And I remember growing up in Abakaliki, most of what I learned about Muslims was that they were very volatile.
Agreed.
You saw Fulanese. They reared their cattle. And they also had machete and
Yes.
those days when we were younger. So we are taught to believe that they were very. As a matter of fact, we were told that for you to marry a Fulani lady, you had to be flogged.
Yeah, it actually happens. It actually does happen.
It does happen.
So that in itself struck an accord of imaginative identification with violence between the Fulanis and violence, between the Hausas and violence, between Islam and violence. It took my going for NYSC for that to be debunked in my mind. When I went for NYSC, I got a chance of living with a Muslim, Yinka. Yinka was a practicing Muslim. We lived in the same room for 1 year, and that debunked everything I knew about Islam. I got to realize that not all Muslims were volatile. Imagine if from the outset, from the foundational level of education, the average young person in Nigeria is taught to understand that a Christian is not volatile, that a Muslim is not volatile. Inclusivity is included in our curricula from the outset. Imagine the kind of nation we'll build. Because much of what we know today as the violence that we see in different parts of Nigeria emanate from that. The case of Deborah, for instance, Deborah Samuel, a couple of years ago, the young lady was practically burnt alive, right? Burnt to death.
And celebrated by everyone.
Celebrated. Why? Because somebody had told them that that person represented an idea that needed to be killed. At that point, those men were not burning an individual. They were not burning a human being. They were destroying an idea. They were attacking a way of life. That was what they were burning. So imagine if we change the narrative. And as Tracy said, we are talking about ideals, not what is, but what could be.
What could be. Raymond, I know you have one final sentence before we move to Enugu Tech Fest.
I think that we are sufficiently on the same page.
Okay.
So, like the ideals, I'll probably just add that with your example as well, you had to live with Yinka. I think that there are geographical divides that make the kind of
hampers that
discourse, right? So I was born in Oka, but I grew up in Cross River. And when I look around me, I don't think I met a Muslim until I not even just got into university. I got into university, joined the debate club, and traveled to Ilorin for a debate tournament. I think that was the first time I actively interacted with a Muslim. So I feel like there is a geographical barrier. So just telling people, Muslims are not terrible.
Even with the geographical divide, I mean, it's like in America, there's some neighborhoods that are mostly white, and some that are mostly black.
And they are racist in these white neighborhoods.
No,
and
but not all of them. There's some white neighborhoods that are Democrats and they have leftist thinking.
Okay.
You know.
Uche, we're going to talk about America very soon. Uche has a lot to say. Uche lives in Dallas, Texas, so he has a lot to say about America.
Texas.
Yes, so like
but yeah, like there's still some white people.
Red cap.
Oh, come on, don't do that.
There's still
My stockings is actually blue.
There's still some white people that grew up around majority white people that aren't racist. You know, because they've been exposed and they've been educated. So that's the point. Like, it doesn't matter if there's a geographical divide. It's not.
I think to Ramon's point. I think Ramon's point is that there are fundamentals that we also have to fix. That's right. Education. Like, so we need, in rethinking the education in the Southeast, we have to rethink every area that things can be learned from, not just the school system. So Tracy, you play your role in school with foundational learning. Parents have to play their role as well. Society also has to play their role as well in terms of doing that, so that we are able to rethink, education properly. Now, so we're still going to come back to the foundation. I see that we all have a lot to say about the role of foundational, and we'll come back to that in a bit. But Joy, I want to talk to you briefly. You build structures that take someone from, I have a skill, so I have an income and a career. Raymond's report in the garage says that there's a huge gap between those things, and it's enormous. Over 60% of the students earn less than 100,000 a month despite working hard. We've established now that this is an economic failure, not just a student failure, because even non-students and graduates hope to earn 100,000 naira to start with. You understand? And that, so Joy, regarding the Enugu Tech Fest, the Enugu Tech Fest is one of the most significant things built in Southeast Nigerian's talent place. And it wasn't built by government. It was built by people like you, people like me. People, we had enablement from the government as well, right? I want to ask you something that might be uncomfortable. But what does it say about our system that the most effective pathway that a student can potentially take from what they're learning in school to being a professional might actually be going to Enugu Tech Fest to learn a tech skill with one goal analytics and win a laptop, and they cannot use that to practice? Like, what does that say about our system?
And in our educational system in the Southeast, like Mr. Alex said, and other people weighed in on that, we have fragmented system. The education is on its own, the skills on their own, and the opportunities, on their own. So there is no connecting factor with all these things, all right? So you find students trying to get skills and then, get jobs, remote jobs, and do all those things, but are they progressing? So with things like the Enugu Tech Festival, it serves as a parallel bridge that brings these things. It brings the skills, brings the tools, also brings those opportunities, because we're bringing together the people from the public sector. We're also bringing the private players, people that have built stuff, and also employing people, bringing more opportunities. We had a lot of partners that had opportunities, training opportunities, and even the laptops we gave out, it was linked to learning. So the educational system that we have, yes, we need to fix it. But then we're not going to dwell on it, trying to make sure that we have a perfect educational system. We should also encourage, and the universities, the government, the private sectors should also encourage all these other, I call them parallel bridges or parallel systems that help. When we talk about festivals, when we talk about skill or upskilling programs, a lot of programs that come up, around. If schools can embrace it, and encourage students to go for these things, because it brings those things that the school system, maybe the universities, things that they cannot bring to them, they can encourage them. And that was why we were very active with the students. We went to their schools, we involved their VCs, and trying to have them embrace what we're doing, to understand first, because you need to penetrate the minds of our people. You understand? You need to tell them this is what we're bringing to the table, and this is why you need to be a part of it. So what things like the Enugu Tech Festival and any other maybe accelerator program, upskilling program will bring, what they do is to bring the lost part or the missing part or the gap, to bridge that gap or the potholes we have in our educational system. Yes, we may not have it perfect now, but while we are building towards that, let's also embrace what we have, so that students, when they come, those practical knowledge, and then seeing people that have done these things, and then hear from them, and they are also giving opportunities and giving tools to back what they have learned. It goes a long way. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. But I have a rejoinder, and my rejoinder is from a sustainability perspective, Joy, because is this truly sustainable? Like, these are young people like yourself. I know Enugu Tech Fest is mainly private sector backed, but public sector enabled, right? So what happens when, like, if we don't have this institutional backing? Because you see, you're going to schools and you're telling the VC, this is something you need to do. So you're trying to convince the people that should be ideally pushing these things to do. And the only reason you're able to do is convincing is because you raise some funds from private sector folks. So what happens when Enugu Tech Fest funding dries up, for instance? Who is able to now push this institutional backing from a sustainability perspective? So my question to you, Joy, is how sustainable can it be that we're trying to solve foundational educational problems using parallel programs or outside the system, if we don't build institutional backing in this? And what's like the path forward for that?
That's a very interesting question because, that's why we're involving different private sector players, all right? What we are doing actually is to make people understand the need for these parallel systems. You understand? So it may take the shape of Enugu Tech Festival today. Some years ago, I think 2022 or so, we had this big cat program,
Yeah.
Moving forward, it takes other shapes, and these things keep happening. But let our people begin to appreciate. So we're trying to move with the Enugu Tech Festival, we're moving from point A to point B. You understand? That was why we started with the numbers game, trying to make people come in their masses, all right? We're projecting, this year we're going to hit 50,000. There is a reason for that because in the Southeast so far, we've not had a lot of programs that will bring people in that number for an innovation event or for a tech event or for a business summit like that and have a lot of young people, So from taking people from this point to the next point, for them to, acquaint themselves, more people to come and see what this is about. And then it inspires all those other players that we're involved in, all right? Then we're also trying to push it so that it can be institutionalized. Events and festivals like this can be institutionalized from the public sector, right? And then also giving that backing also to other private sectors that want to carry on this thing, having known the importance of what this kind of festival does. So we may not say that it's going to be this way forever, but then we have moved from a certain point. By what we're able to do now, we've moved from this point to the next point. So we keep on handling the baton and keep on, trying to do what we can to sustain what we have created.
Thank you so much, Joy. That's beautiful. And I think it typifies that there is the triple helix of innovation conversation or the quadruple because there's government, there's industry from private sector, there's academia, and they have to come together to make things happen. But more importantly, from what Joy is saying, there's also community where the community has a part to play in making this happen. Thank you so much, Joy. Alex, I want to start first of all by acknowledging what Educare has built. 300,000 families, thousands of schools. It's real impact. We've heard the story of what happened with JAM last year. We've heard the stories of things you've done in your community where you went from people scoring like less than 100 in JAM to scoring 300 and above in JAM, and it became a culture in your community. It's real. With the Maths Olympiad that just finished, where you were here on Afia TV, this is actually real impact. And I want to say that we thank you and we acknowledge and we appreciate a lot of the work that you're doing for education in the Southeast, Mr. Alex. Now, I want to go a little bit deeper than the headline numbers tonight, particularly regarding the Southeast Maths Olympiad. And I've already seen their plans for 2027. It's bigger, it's better, and you're building this in public, which I find very interesting. Now, you led the Southeast Maths Olympiad, which brought children from every Southeast state into one competitive platform. What did you see when those children showed up from Ebonyi, from Anambra, from Imo, from Enugu, from Abia? And what did the data tell you about Southeast talents, the young people in Southeast that surprised you or confirmed something you already suspected?
Okay, thank you so much for the question. I mean, looking at the data sets, there's a lot of interesting discoveries. And one of the most important things I saw is what I call clear educational inequality. A child in, let's say, Evergreen Schools in Enugu or Diamond College in Owerri, and a child in a public school, let's say community comprehensive school, their learning gap is just light here. It's just too wide. I use the illustration of it's more like you are walking or you are trekking to America. It's very far. And you just can't close this by just complaining. So while I was looking at it, I saw even the areas that children are struggling in, like in the primary, generally, they had issues with algebra, they had issues with coordinate geometry. And if children are struggling with algebra, coordinate geometry, and a few other topics, foundationally, they will struggle forever in maths. So probably you see more children growing up to tilt towards the arts, not towards the sciences. But we need more children in sciences because we need more of innovations and discoveries, engineering to solve a lot of complex problems in our society. So the thing is, we need to, that's one of the things we are currently doing in this 2027 registration. That's why we started so early, so that we can be able to close out the gaps as much as we can. For people that have signed up, I mean, we have over 8,000 people that have signed up already. We just launched it last week.
Wow.
And we're expecting to have 50,000 children in total before we close out the registration. And what we are doing is we have to get, because one thing about learning is pedagogy. Pedagogy is what is your method of delivery. You hear of a super interesting teacher, you hear an uninteresting teacher. So we're able to say, okay, we're able to get one of the best contents, both in the delivery and also in practices, right? And we're making it available for every single child. Everything is free, right? Whether they have a phone or a computer, a laptop, or anything they have, they can access this proper unified learning content with a proper chronology of learning. If you go through this program, it is guaranteed that your math prowess will scale up to at least a 75% for a struggling child. And that is what we want to achieve, so that by the time we are coming into the 2027 competition, the gap is not going to be too wide the way it was in this last competition. Because if you notice, the children that won are people from very good private schools.
Sure.
I mean, Evergreen, for instance, that children are already using the engineering maths. People in SS1 are using engineering maths to do a lot of things. And you want to compare with a child that is being taught to 1 + 1 is 2. So the difference is just too wide. So we are closing out those gaps. And if we eventually succeed, which I believe we will, that has already created a very different kind of energy. And I'm even happy now, even in Smart School, a lot of their children are now joining the program.
Yeah.
And every other, I mean, the government, in as much as they're directly not engaging us, but indirectly, you can see a lot of their children coming in, which is beautiful, because I want to see how every single child, because the constant in our society is the children. The governors, the government will come, they will go, they will die, a new set will come, but the constant is the children as the society. So whatever we are doing is all about the society. So those revelations have helped us. You see now that a lot of people are into teaching, not because they love teaching, because they can't find another job and they have to resort to teaching. Has been designed to be the job of the most helpless people in the society and the poorest people in the society. We actually have to change that narrative, right? But you see a lot of them in classrooms. They don't even understand what teaching is. You know, you can know something, but impacting the knowledge can be the biggest problem. That's why you can be going to churches and one day you just came into a church and a particular preacher is preaching, and all of a sudden you realize that you are giving your life to Christ. It's because of the method of delivery, and you cannot ignore it. So these are the things that we are trying to create, that equality. The inequality is just too much.
Yeah.
So if you can be able to get everybody to a particular level, let them compete from a proper fair point, right? The competition last year, because of an academic gap, which I could have never known if we didn't host the competition, it was actually not completely fair. So we're trying to ensure that everything becomes very equal. So these are some of the gaps that we have identified. These children need a lot of attention. They need a lot of care. They need a lot of clear intervention. They need a lot of investment in the learning. You know, learning is evolving.
Yeah.
Today we are still talking about teach them basics and this and that. I mean, you should understand how AI is in today's world. And for me, my vision about the children in the South is I am not interested in competing with Nigerians or Africans. I'm trying to raise a generation whereby we can compete globally and be ahead. We're going to be the greatest workforce within 10 years in Africa. And we can't achieve that by trying to. That's why whenever somebody calls me to talk about maybe things like Jambo, I shun it off because this is not the goal.
Yeah.
That's why, thank God, our children are going to International STEM Olympiad and they are going to win. These are the kind of things I want our children to compete on. This is actually where I want them to be. Let them compete with people in Singapore, China, Finland, the US. Because this is the kind of thing that pushes us to be where we need to be. So the kind of learning content, the kind of thing that we are looking at right now is the things that takes them to that level. So these are the kind of things that keeps me awake at night. Things that happen in those countries, in those places, are the things I'm deeply interested in, right? So these are some of the discoveries, and I believe that my response probably will be super helpful for what we're discussing.
Yeah, I think it's very helpful, and I hope, Alex, that this is something that you publish, because it's humongous, the work that we have to do, and it's not something that just you can do. It's not something that we can also just even crowdsource for. It's something that government has to take a stance. Like a lot of the things that the government is doing, they have to actually take a stance in changing these things fundamentally so we can fix that. Uche, do you want to also respond on some points that Alex has raised? Tracy, I think you might also want something to add. Uche?
All right. So first of all, thank you so much, Alex. The work you are doing is very, very inspiring. I believe that when you get into a dark room, you have two options. Either you sit and analyze the density of the darkness, or you decide to actually introduce light. One of them will solve the problem, the other one will not. The one that will solve the problem is introducing light.
Okay.
And insofar as you are introducing light every day, Alex, I sincerely appreciate what you're doing. And I completely agree with you. The competition is not Nigeria. The team I work with, I usually tell we are based in Abakaliki.
Yeah.
And I usually tell them that there is nothing like Abakaliki standard. There is nothing like Nigerian standard. It's either excellent or it's not. It's either it works or it doesn't work. And insofar as you are trying to raise a generation of young people who are conscious about solving problems at a global scale, I completely agree with that. I want to use an example to illustrate that. What we know at the moment is that quite a number of young people across Nigeria are hosting their content on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, on TikTok, on YouTube. What we fail to acknowledge is that neither of these platforms is owned by an African. All of them are owned by people who are not Africans, who do not identify as Africans. X, for instance, Elon Musk does not identify as an African.
Okay, I see. That's why he said identify.
Yeah. So if these guys one day decide to pull their digital infrastructure, the majority of young people who are earning through these platforms they'll go broke overnight. So we are operating a borrowed economy in that sense. So I vibe with what Alex is saying. Now, Alex, I would also want to invite you to, in as much as you are investing in STEM, I'd also invite you to invest in the arts.
Because I saw you shaking your head when Alex was, talking about the importance of. So talk a little bit about the humanities, especially because you all have backgrounds in humanities, debates. Even though you studied sciences in school.
I studied English, so I'm fully from the humanities.
So let's talk a little bit about humanities.
I like to say that the essence of education is not to maximize profits, it's to maximize the human potential. So schools are not factories.
Okay.
The students are not employees. The teachers, they are not taskmasters. And the essence of education is not to maximize profit. And if we want to maximize the fullness of the human potential, we need to develop all facets of the human self. When we talk about Africa, for instance, and we talk about iconic figures in Africa, we talk about people like Chinua Achebe, we talk about people like Wole Soyinka, we talk about people like Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, and the rest of them, even Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana.
Yeah.
Neither of these guys studied the sciences, but they were the ones that laid the foundation for what we know today as the African persona.
Yeah.
They were the ones that interpreted Africa to the rest of the world. My work revolves around narratives. And the one thing you begin to realize when you study narratives is that the things that we see, the things that we do, the way we relate with society is purely contingent upon the stories that we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
And these things are mediated through the humanities. So Alex, is an invitation I'm extending to you that as much as you are investing in sciences, that you should also consider investing in the arts as well. Thank you very much.
Alex, do you accept that invitation? Because
Yes, I accept it because his argument is very convincing. So it's something that we'll deeply look into.
all right, thank you. So I would also connect you and Alex after this, so that it's something that we actually start doing. Tracy, do you want to add anything around this as well, particularly from, I think, the pedagogical aspect to teachers?
I mean, I have a lot to say apart from teachers.
Okay.
Even. So yes, I do agree with Alex with how teachers are treated. It's a big problem because it's not just a school thing where schools decide to pay teachers not very well. It's also a societal problem. You know, parents, you tell a parent, oh, this is how much, and they're like, is it not just ABC that this stuff is learning in school? So yeah, that's something that we hope to solve, but I don't think it's something that schools can do alone. I think it's something that we have to approach as a society, and you know, how do we value these people that impact? And it's not even a Nigerian problem.
Yeah, actually.
You know, it's not, because I've read that even in the US, a lot of people are leaving the teaching profession because of
You don't
being
pay them.
underpaid.
Yeah.
And then, yes, competitions are very important, and STEM and science are very important. But let's look at the world. There's 7 billion people in the world, and most of these people are regular people. You know?
Not everybody is.
So while we're focusing on these people that can excel in these things, I think it's very good that we don't neglect these regular people, because these are people that really will make up most of society. You know, so we're not thinking of what the students can do while they're in school, but the kind of people that they will be, like he said, the human aspect of it, but the kind of people that they will be when they get older and they become part of society.
Yeah.
So I think that we should, as much as we like to talk about science and, you know, like how science is changing the world and how it's important, I think we should also create platforms for people that are not science inclined, because not everyone is science inclined, and might not even be like a foundational problem.
Yeah.
It might just be that their brains are not wired the same way as these other people that are science inclined.
That makes sense. And I think something else to add is that there's a lower barrier to entry for humanities, especially for like and I say this in terms of tools you need to get. This is not a shade. We are a multidimensionally poor country. K. Stroud, the engineering master's book, is expensive, for instance. That's just a book. Think about the tools, you know. Educare has some things that it can help gamify learning, but you need an interactive whiteboard for that, you know. So some of the things that require innovation from the science side is very difficult. So we can't even compete against the globe, like the Occidentals, with some of these tools that we have. I was in Texas the other time, the State University, and I saw that just the State University had a 3D printing lab that had over 40 3D printers in a State University. I don't see the type of innovation I'll go and do that can match something like that. I saw a couple of young folks. There's a robot that they created called the Firebot. It was funded by the National Science Foundation. And that Firebot can withstand up to 6,000 degrees Celsius of heat in solving this. But with the humanities, you know, I feel it's a lower barrier of entry that you can also factor.
It's like, for instance, for a lot of people, when you were growing up, there were some certain things that you thought you wanted to be. Like, your parents would tell you, you'll be a doctor, you'll be an engineer.
Mama doctor.
And when they ask you, you're like, oh, I'm going to be a doctor. But by the time you get there and you're actually like more aware of everything, you realize that that's not what you want to do.
Yeah.
You know, even though you've studied for that your whole life, then it leaves you with this hole that you need to feel like, what else? So I think there should be like a wider
nuanced conversation.
Yeah. And the conversation needs to also be extended regarding how the humanities is applied to society. Mm-hmm. I spent 4 years, 3.5 years, because I did not experience strike in a Nigerian university. I was in
what university was that?
Alex Ekweme Federal University. Hello, everyone. Okay. So I spent 3.5 years studying English and literary studies in the university, and I never learned how to write a news report. This was before AI. Content development in terms of writing was a booming market, a booming industry at the time. Technical writing was booming. Business writing was booming. I did not learn how to do any of these things in the university.
You just learned sounds and
for
diphthongs and all of that.
3.5 years. I just learned diphthongs, monotones, the definition of a verb,
Bisilectal.
noun phrase, and the rest of them. Now, I've taught I've taught undergraduate courses in the US for a couple of years since 2022.
Yeah.
And the one thing I've come to realize, I teach writing.
Yeah.
And the one thing I've come to realize is that in the US, they don't teach these kids the definition of a verb. They don't teach them the definition of a noun. They teach them how to use a noun, how to use a verb, what to do with language, not necessarily spending so much time on analyzing language. And I think that's something we need to learn in Nigeria, especially in the humanities. We need to start teaching our young people how to deploy the tools that the humanities avail them towards solving problems in their communities. And this was preponderant in the 1960s.
Yeah.
That's how we produce people like Chinua Achebe and the rest of them. That's why they had the platform to thrive. So I think that we need to
Go back
rethink the way we conceive the humanities. And finally, let me say this. I just want to respond to you, Ezra.
Yeah.
That the humanities is not a place where you go to out because you don't have any other choice. No.
Can I set context?
Wait.
Context setting. Just give me 1 second.
Okay.
Context setting is low barrier of entry means you don't need a lab, all of these things. Like you can
But you
do
do.
humanity from an interest perspective.
No, but you do.
Relatively to the sciences.
No, you do.
Relatively to the sciences.
You do. Language, for instance.
Because of the language lab you guys had in
there is
Finland.
something called language lab.
Yeah.
And you see, I think the point is that we've completely misconstrued
What the humanities is
the way
about.
we look at humanities. We think humanities is just something you do for fun. No, humanities is actually something that is very functional. It's something that has a place in it. And you need tools to be able to achieve that.
Yeah.
And I think it's because our education system seems to be preparing our young people for a world that no longer exists. A world that is predicated on the assumption that when you graduate, that there are jobs waiting for you out there.
It's not
Those
the reality.
things are not there anymore. So our young people need to be taught, even in the humanities, to create jobs. They need to be taught to run. I've run companies before.
Yeah.
I have certifications from quite a number of Ivy League schools. And that's because I gained the foundational knowledge on how to run a business while studying English. Why? Because English opened my mind
There was an application to it.
to other things.
Okay.
So I now began to specialize in order to learn how to run specific things. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I hear you on that. Tracy, you want to add something
I
quickly?
just wanted, I really agree with what he says. I think we underestimate how much the humanities, humanities affect us. Like, just look at the government. Let's start from government. Policy making, that's the humanities. International relations, that's the humanities. Even, right, of course, humanities and STEM, it works hand in hand because, look at what we're talking through.
Okay.
But then we don't really, this conversation that we're having is an English topic. Do you understand?
This is the humanities.
This is humanity. So I think we really underestimate
I
how
hear everybody.
interconnected it is.
I hear us.
So you're considering.
I concede now, myself and Alex concede now.
You guys
I'm
will come and take courses in the humanities.
But yes, I concede that. I concede
I
that
love
everybody needs a touch of humanities. Alex, I want to come back to you very briefly because a lot of people see the glamorous part of the work that you do. A lot of people see, oh, Alex just did something, so people were able to do their jams and pass well. Oh, Alex just did something, so people were able to go and write jam a little bit later instead of 6:30 a.m. But Alex, foundationally, you're CEO of Educare, an EdTech system. So I want us to explore EdTech's African problem to see where does it break, because EdTech has a very specific challenge in the African country. It works brilliantly in pilots. And I think Raymond spoke about that earlier on, where we said that it's good to talk about, but in implementation. So it works brilliantly in pilots, in press releases, in very controlled environments. And then when you try to deploy it, it breaks down. When you try to scale it, it breaks down. So Alex, you've been navigating this, not just in the Southeast, but in Nigeria. So I want you to be honest with us. Where are the real bottlenecks in the education, like in Africa, in the Southeast particularly? You've spoken about the inequality you've seen from the Olympiad and some of these things you've done. So what are the real bottlenecks? Is it technical? People don't have devices, people don't have lights, people don't have connectivity. Is it political? That government of Buruburu, for instance, have not done these things? People are not buying these things. Or is it even cultural that teachers are feeling threatened by technology, or administrators want to protect the way things are at the end of the day, or parents also that care just pass WAEC and pass JAMB? So, Alex, could you give us some fruit bombs around this problem?
Okay, so your question, you actually asked the question and also answered it, but I'll just go a little bit deeper into your answers. So EdTech actually has to touch all these key components, right? So one of the reasons why a lot of people have come to fail, we're very lucky. We are 12 years now, and we think probably will likely be the largest in the space.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I've noticed, the pattern that with people here, people that have come and gone, is because the way you solve EdTech in Nigeria specifically is different from the way you solve it everywhere else, like even in Europe, Middle East, and the rest. So there's this cultural pattern that I've noticed. And I noticed that when we were trying to scale to Europe, I noticed that Europeans love I can call it modular approach, whereby they are buying a software for emails, they are buying a software for a different kind of learning, for assignment. In a typical school in Europe, probably will be using like 10 to 15 software. There's one for parent, there's one for parent evening. Every single thing is broken down into pieces and they are not even connected. They love it that way, and their reasons are very simple. They don't want a single point of failure. When you go to places like Canada, they have something similar. The US is a little bit more linked to what's happening in Nigeria, but they still have a little bit of that European part. But Nigeria love unified systems, right? Nigeria wants it where everything is in one place. They love it where it's cheap. So that's why you see somebody launch, let's say Educare launched a platform whereby children can prepare for this. All of a sudden, what they perceived as attraction never worked. They make a lot of noise. Or you, let's say, had plenty of people. At the end of the day, the conversion is so little. Like, is this for real? The reason is that you didn't know how to approach it. What we did differently, which for me, I didn't even know, because one of the things we did is we just started moving and started iterating. We didn't really have a clear pattern of how we want to approach it. But when we started noticing the patterns in the market, we just realized that unified systems and something that is really stable and reliable is what people really want. And if you can achieve that, you can now build around from it. So what we did was we brought all the tools in one platform, called it the ERP, right? The magic ERP, which is what Educare offered. So a lot of these schools, probably have over 2,400 of them, top private schools, started relying on our infrastructure, right? We now layered in payments. Our payment processing processes far more than any other person, right?
Yeah.
We never advertise it. When we introduced the readiness assessment, right? We grew so fast, over 10 million users, right? And these are things that people build singularly and they struggle and fail. So at the end of the day, when we now looked at, okay, how can we build more interactive tools? We can build more tools, but we still embed it in our system, right? So it made it easier. So people now rely on us as that single point. So it becomes practically impossible for any singular, unless you are doing something so unique. Let's say you have something like the First Colorado that has a unique way of teaching different things, maybe gamified way of teaching sciences. People can love it. Nigerians will not pay. Nigerian students don't pay for anything. Nigerian teachers don't pay for anything. Nigerian workforce love it free. And the conversion between freemium and paid, you may never achieve it. If you are trying to use the freemium model, especially for educational stuffs, you may have 1 million users. You may not be able to convert even up to 500. So, and these are the things, when we started, we were using the freemium model. We stopped. We don't do freemium. If you are not paying, don't even start, so that we can help build around a culture. And it worked like magic for us, right? So that is why you see us doubling every year and you see a lot of people struggling. So these are the things that we've observed over the years. I remember when we were moving to Dubai, one of the biggest issues we had was the color. I mean, then I didn't really know that whenever you are moving into a market, like a place like Dubai, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, they are very big on being American or European. If you are not American or European, they don't want to hear you. We are the one, I mean, in Iraq now, we are the leading technology company in Iraq. Those ones, they don't really mind. But in Dubai, I mean, when we had the competition, the bidding and everything, we won. We were meant to be the licensed software to power the entire UAE. But the reason we lost it was very simple. We were blacks. In short, this is one of their main directors that told us, you guys won, but you are black. So they have to go and look for European partners. I don't think it's ISAM that finally used.
Wow.
So, but those ones, you learn it in the way. So these are the things that we've observed. I'm trying to think of some EdTech companies that are building stuffs that you will see that they will struggle. And unfortunately, what they are working hard to be to charge people, we're probably going to release it for free.
Yeah.
So it makes it a lot more difficult for even them to compete. When we launched, I remember a lot of people have been doing all those past questions and the rest. Once we launched our Readiness platform, everybody came in because we didn't just solve what they're trying to solve. We solved it a lot better because we have access to more data than anybody else.
Yeah.
We understand that people want to see their gap analysis. We solved that part, and then we made it open and super easy for them. So these are some of the trends that we have seen. EdTech is extremely hard. To be frank, if I knew that this is how hard it's going to be, I wouldn't even start at the beginning.
I'm happy, no.
But we have already started, and thank God we're able to navigate through and build something that is super valuable.
Yeah.
And sometimes I used to tell my team that it is too important that we solve this problem, because if we didn't solve this problem, people are going to still rely on people probably in the US or England, which is going to be very difficult now, because before now, people that we took away from the local markets here, like the Sims, you have to pay them probably £10,000 to set up every single adjustment. You have to pay £5,000. Some schools will pay like £20,000 to do some very small things. So now we're giving you a significantly less amount. We are paying in Naira, and we are giving you reliability. These are one of the things that made everybody come in, even when we did the payment thing and so many other things that we've done. So this is actually how we've navigated it through.
Yeah.
And this is why many people struggle. That singular approach is very difficult. It's not like it's impossible, but it's extremely difficult for the EdTech. And students know they pay. Even if you do anything for university, they will not. Those students, you'll rather find crack or find a free way. So if you're trying to build something to succeed or to be able to earn or do all those things, trying to serve Nigerian students, forget about payment. Maybe you can find a way to figure out to use their data to be able to do something great. But if it wants payment and subscription, it will be extremely hard for you to crack that part.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Alex. Thank you so much. And just in repeating the appeal of Uche for you to tap into the humanities, I think you should write about some of these things, because it's so much that people can learn from based on your experience. And most importantly, I'm thankful that you do not know how stressful the EdTech was going to be, because if not, a lot of our kids used to be getting less than 300 in JAM. So thank you so much. Uche, I want to come back to you. And my question is around what exposure does. And I want you to share a personal testimony to typify this. You started from Urban Boys, Abakaliki. I remember Urban Boys. I was in CSMT. We were debating against Urban Boys. And they used to come flying out their shirts, but they were good at debate once in a while. Then you went to Funai, where we met. And then University of Michigan, and then a couple of Ivy Leagues. And now you do all the things that you do. So this is not just an academic journey. It's rewriting what you believe is possible. So I want you to be honest with us tonight. What does exposure, and I want you to share this from your personal experience, and Tracy, you can also add when it's done, but what does exposure do to a person that a curriculum cannot replicate? And how do we give that type of transformation, not just to a couple of people like you that get scholarships to go abroad, but everybody, more than 2 million young people in the Southeast who will never live in Suka, who will never live in Ko, who will never live Afia, any of these places? How do we cascade it down?
You're right. I went to Urban, but not Urban Boys.
Okay.
Urban Model Secondary School.
Okay.
So you have to add the model.
Urban model, not Urban Boys.
I had a joke a few months ago where someone said that whenever you see model attached to the name of any school, there's nothing model about that school. Whenever you see
International
grammar. The students, they will not know how to speak English. International, there is nothing international about them. So, but mine was Urban Model Secondary School.
Okay.
Whether there was anything model about it or not, that's debatable. I graduated from there, and then I went to Funai, just as you said.
Before you went to Funai?
Oh yeah. I graduated from secondary school in 2010, and I spent 3 years at home before getting into the university. Within those 3 years, I did quite a number of things. At a point, I was a bus conductor in Abakaliki.
Oh my God.
Yes, for a couple of months, actually, before I progressed to teaching, and finally I got admission into the university. And for me, I will probably still speak to this much later, but one of the things that my experience staying at home for 3 years taught me was that what young people lack in Africa, and particularly in Ebonyi State, is opportunity, not necessarily ability. I had the potential to go to school, but I did not have the opportunity to go to school. I later got a scholarship that would see me through the university, got another scholarship to do my master's, and then another one to do my PhD, and I'm a scholarship kid, pretty much.
Yeah.
But then to the question you asked about exposure, I remember that when I was in Ebonyi State, when I was in Funai, we called it Funai then. Now
yeah,
it's
before
AE. This was during the crypto boom, the boom of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I did not know about Bitcoin until I graduated from the university. I finished from the university in 2017. I did not know about Bitcoin until I graduated from the university. And that was principally because of where I went to school, because of where I grew up as well, because of the kind of ecosystem I had around myself. It took my finishing from the university and then traveling to Ondo State. When I graduated, I got a chance to serve in Ondo State. I was posted to the governor's office, so I got a chance to work with quite a number of very amazing people there in Western Nigeria. It took that opportunity for my eyes to be opened to some of the possibilities that existed in Nigeria. Let's not talk about abroad yet. That existed in Nigeria. And then from there, I would later travel to the US. When I got to the US, I'll tell you a story. In 2020, I think it was 2020, during COVID, I was planning to start a business in Nigeria, in Abakaliki. I was planning to start a pig farm in Abakaliki. And that was because I wanted to solve the problem of lack of access to food in Nigeria. But then I was looking for $30,000 to use to start a pig farm. And my plan at that time was that when I get $30,000, I would leave America and come back to Nigeria to start my pig farm, and that I would go into processing, and then I would grow. I've always been a big dreamer, you see. But then I remember connecting with quite a number of very amazing people there in the US. I lived in Michigan at the time, and I met a man who told me that the owner of the biggest meat producing company in Michigan at the time was his friend. As a matter of fact, they went to business school together. So he arranged for a meeting to happen, and the man took us on a tour of his plant, of his facility. He was showing us different machines. And casually, my friend asked him, how much did you buy this particular machine of all the different machines they had? He said, oh yeah, I bought that one for $3 million. And here I was.
Your capital was $30,000.
Here I was looking for $30,000. Not even up to 10%.
0.1%.
Right? So about 1% actually. But then bottom line was that my mind opened to what was possible. I began to realize that owning a pig farm was more than just owning a small facility. But then that also tells the kind of education system I received, because I received an education that taught me to solve the problems that existed only within my immediate community.
Okay.
Not necessarily
optimizing for the
in
world.
the global community. I wasn't being trained to face the world. I was being trained to face my community. So my competition were the people I saw around me. I wasn't thinking, just as Alex said, I wasn't thinking about competing with people in America.
Yeah.
That wasn't my competition. Now, to the second layer of the question. So for me, the first thing that exposure does is that it opens your mind as a young person. And then it also puts you in a room with people who have done it before.
Yeah.
There is nothing as powerful as seeing regular people doing extraordinary things. when you sit around the table with people who are doing amazing things, one of the things you realize about them is that they are just regular people.
They're normal people.
They're just human beings. There is nothing fantastic about them, as it were.
Yeah.
They do not have two heads and all that. When I went to the US newly, to be honest, one of the first shock I received was that I discovered that the things I was taught while I was in Nigeria, they weren't particularly too different from the things I learned in the US. It was just the modality of the teaching, how they taught it and why they were teaching. That was what was different. I was being taught to do certain things that I did not know about here in Nigeria. Now, to the second layer of the question you asked about how do we ensure that the average kid in Abakaliki gets to experience that.
Without traveling.
Without traveling.
Yeah.
In 2022, I came back to Nigeria and we did our first program at One Youth. We organized a teachers debate competition, teachers debate training boot camp. We called it GGD and Global Great Debaters Nigeria. So we brought teachers from across Nigeria, brought them together in Abakaliki to be trained for 1 week. Why did we do? We brought trainers from all over the world. We brought a trainer from China, one from the US, and then a couple of persons from Rwanda as well. Why did we do that? Because we realized that exposure has changed in the way it happens. Before, it used to be a case of let's get as many people as possible to leave Nigeria, to go to Europe, to go to America, to be exposed. Now, the world has changed in such a way that we need to bring those people to Nigeria to expose Nigerians. Because if we want to get Nigerians out of Nigeria to America, only a handful will be able to emigrate.
Yeah.
But a vast majority of the people will still be here in Nigeria. So that's why we started the model we adopted, where in 2022, we brought people to come and train teachers.
Yeah.
In 2023, we decided to organize a policy boot camp. And then from 2024, we started to organize a debate competition for secondary school students, where we started in Ebonyi State, then gradually we scaled to Nigeria, where we brought students from all across Nigeria together to come and compete in Ebonyi State. Why am I doing that in Ebonyi State? Because of my experience. I want the average Ebonyi kid to start interacting with kids from Lagos, from Maiduguri, from other parts of Nigeria very early, to expose their minds to what is possible. This year, we are doing West and Central Africa. After the preliminaries, we are bringing all the finalists, about 450 participants in all, will be in Abakaliki. We will house them, we will feed them, we'll put them in hotels and all that, feed them for 1 week. Why are we doing that? Again, because we want to get the average kid from outside of Ebonyi State into Ebonyi State to interact with the average Ebonyi kid, to show them what is possible, and then for those kids to also come and learn about Ebonyi State, for them to come and find out what is really going on in Ebonyi State. And Alex talked about the fact that he hadn't been to Ebonyi State maybe in a while. A lot has happened in Ebonyi State between 2015 and now. There has been lots of transformation. As a matter of fact, last year when we were organizing our boot camp, quite a number of people were asking questions that they thought we were crazy for inviting people to come to Ebonyi State. They were asking us, why not Lagos? Why not Abuja? At least, even if you do not want to do it in those two places, why don't you do it in Enugu so that people can just fly in? And I told them that if you can fly into Enugu, you can come to Ebonyi. As a matter of fact, what we did was that we put vehicles at the airport to convert people from Enugu to Ebonyi. So all the people who flew into Enugu were converted free of charge to Ebonyi. We had people traveling for 2 nights to come to Ebonyi last year. And this year we'll be having people travel for probably longer than that to come from all across West and Central Africa. So the way we can achieve that, and the way we've been achieving that, is by bringing people from all over the world to come here. By 2027, we'll be doing the whole of Africa. And God willing, from 2028, we'll be having conversations about the possibility of bringing people from all across the world.
You're having conversations with the US constantly to bring people from the US. So, Tracy, just briefly, just touch on exposure as a tool for education, actually, in the Southeast.
Yeah, exposure is very important. I mean, as someone who left, I think I'm going to talk about it as from 2 perspectives: exposure in Nigeria and exposure outside Nigeria. So I schooled from secondary school. I went to boarding school, and it was not in Southeast. So I didn't come back to the Southeast until after my university. So all this while, after primary school, I had lived outside the Southeast. And that's really changed my mentality towards like different people in the country and how they live. I have friends that come from all parts of Nigeria. I don't have any thoughts, any
I'm not thinking this
uninformed
person is from this
thoughts. Yeah,
place.
this, you know. So, and of course, in so many ways, that influences the way I think about things. You know, that's not something a lot of Nigerians have. Like, say someone that lives in Lagos and they're like, I've never left Lagos my whole life. And then they have all these premonitions and thoughts about like how other people outside Lagos live that they might not know, you know, anything. Then I would also talk from a global perspective because I had the opportunity to travel, especially when I was in secondary school. There were lots of school trips outside the country. And you can see how that influenced a lot of people that I went to school with. I have a classmate that went to Fashion Institute in California, and now she's a fashion designer speaking at Imperial College. Like, look at the possibilities. You know, it's no longer, oh, this person has to be a doctor, an engineer. Like, it widens your mind, it opens your mind, and
Yeah.
it shows you that it's not just these things that your parents have, you know, hammered in your head because of their own level of exposure. There's so many things that you can be and you can do. So exposure is very
Important.
important.
Thank you. Uche, I'll come back to you because I know you want to have, but maybe during that, just because of time. Raymond, I like to default to your reports because it opened my eyes a lot into a lot of the things that we've done. And also, just for context, our virtual audience on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, if you have any questions, if you want to make any contributions, just let us know. This is a conversation that we're happy to involve you into. We also have some comments from Facebook. We have Innocent Chigozie-Wodo, who says, my suggestion on education in South is, number one, the practice of ranking students, first, second, or third, should be abolished, as class positions do not support holistic learning. Instead, students should be encouraged to focus on achieving mastery across all subjects. Earning high marks, such as A's and B's, is far more valuable than ranking first in a class of below average peers. Furthermore, external examinations prioritize individual subject grades rather than relative class positions. Innocent Chigozie-Wodo also says, number two, change the structure of 5 years of primary school, 3 years of junior school, and 4 years of senior school. Okay, change the structure to 5, 3, 4, 5 years of primary school, 3 years of junior school, and 4 years of senior school. It is a well-known fact that 3 years are not enough to thoroughly cover the senior curriculum and adequately prepare students for external examinations like WAEC, NECO, and JAMB. In the US, for example, the most common US structure is 5-3-4, elementary, middle, and high school, totaling 12 years of pre-university education. Thoughts?
I feel like when it comes to conversational and education design, I'll probably defer
Okay.
to Tracy.
Yeah.
I actually I like where the person is coming from. One system I don't really like, or I wish would be changed in Nigeria, is how it's like, let's say you want to get into university, it's dependent on your WAEC scores. Maybe you've been doing well all your life in school, and then maybe you had, because people fail exams,
Yeah.
and then you're unable to get into any school because you failed all these external exams. Meanwhile, in most Western countries, they look
Yeah.
at your GPA as a tool for admission.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I think that there needs to be a change in
In
systems,
that.
and grading is also not. I agree
Do
with
you,
that
sorry,
person.
final question, do you grade in Cornelia?
No, we do not.
Okay, so
We
the
do not.
grade, okay.
We're an inclusive school.
We'll talk about that shortly. Ochman?
Okay, let me say that not grading
Okay.
does not necessarily mean promoting the right kind of education.
Mm.
Grading can also have its value, but the question is, what are we predicating the grading on?
Okay.
Can we have a class where nobody takes first position? Can first position be predicated on the attainment of a certain grade point average?
So
Such-
95 and above, for instance,
Precisely.
summa cum laude.
Precisely.
Okay.
Something like that.
Okay.
Something like that.
Okay, okay.
Such that it becomes a holistic experience. And then let me speak to what Tracy mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
About WAEC being the index for admissions into the universities. We've had this conversation before, that why is it that a student who uses English language to pass economics as a course, to pass mathematics, to pass biology, to pass government, to pass Christian religious studies, and to pass every other subject, gets a D in English, and that person is not allowed to get into the university? Now, let's ask ourselves the question of why is it that this person who has proved that they understand English enough to use it to pass every other subject? Why is it that this person was not able to pass the subject called English? Could it be that the way English is taught in Nigerian schools today is not about communicative competence, that it's rather about abstractions? So because this person does not know the difference between noun phrase and adjectival clause,
in definition form, not in practice.
Not in practice. The person is not allowed to get into the university. So for me, I think even the way WAEC is assessed is problematic. The first layer is what you pointed out, Tracy, which is that WAEC shouldn't just be the sole index for who gets into the universities. It should be a holistic journey. The second part for me is that the way WAEC is even assessed is faulty. A child shouldn't be denied admission into the university just because the person did not pass the English language. And I speak as someone who studied English at the university.
And who lectured English as well.
And who teaches
you want to
English.
add on this, or can I ask you a direct question from the garage?
So I could do both.
Okay, so let me ask, and then in answering, you can now do that. So, your report says that students are succeeding despite their institutions. For me, that's the greatest, what's the word? Like, for me, it was shocking that the educational systems are supposed to encourage, people are doing despite. So I'm succeeding as a Nigerian despite being in Nigeria, not because of the institutions. So the garage, instead of UNN, is where talent is being shaped. So here's my blunt question. Should we stop investing in reforming universities and start building more garages? Is the institution dead for the purpose of talent development? So you can start by giving context there and then answering this.
I was just going to chime in that I also find it very curious how punitive WAEC is, right? So you fail one subject and you lose an entire year. So you don't have the option of taking a receipt in like a month, in a couple of weeks, in 3 months. It's like the consequence of having an off day in one paper is that you lose 1 year of my life. I feel like that's pretty punitive. It does not sound like the goal is like supporting students. It feels
just
like
to punish you.
Yeah, it feels like such a penalty.
It would be more than 1 year of your life.
Precisely. I find that very baffling. But back to the question, if you're an investor, you are considering investing in a school versus a garage, please give me your money. But I think that's a difficult question to answer. I think that the answer is no, though.
Yeah.
I think that universities especially play a very important role in formation. Of course, there is the journey from formational education at the lower levels to university. I think that the thing that makes the most difference for economies is industry. I think that universities provide an academic layer for industry that is transformational everywhere else in the world. When you look at the most of North America, when you look at Europe and you look at the relationship between academia and industry, I think it is very clear that if we redesign how academics worked here and we made the required investments in industry, that we have the potential to have exponential growth.
Okay.
I think that things like the garage and enablement for talent are things that happen side by side. I think that in a world where we had more sufficient investment in the educational system, especially from an infrastructure perspective, I think that the garage probably now exists more of as a social layer to provide community, to provide enablement that is otherwise not present on campuses. I think that this is probably more consistent with other parts of the world where even when they have more robust university systems, they have things like fellowships and programs that exist to complement the education that people acquire from their regular undergraduate or postgraduate degrees.
That makes sense. Uche, briefly.
Okay, so I just wanted to also chime in that there is something called the CWAS program in Nigeria.
Yeah.
Is there a possibility of drawing a nexus between a program like the Garage and the CWAS program, such that when these students have to go for CWAS, for IT, right? They can just go to the Garage and spend 6 months of their lives learning something.
We already have, excellent question. Last year, we had a handful of students who opted to spend their time for CWAS, interning at the Garage. We've had similar conversations, both at an individual level where students reach out to us and ask for this, but also at an at the faculty level where faculty deans have conversations about this possibility. I think that it is possible. I also think that there is a sort of design problem with how COS works in this moment. So I participated in COS, I studied materials engineering, and at the point where students involve themselves in COS, the feeling is that they should have a clear idea of the role they want to play within industry, and then they are going to acquire experience in relation to that role they want to play. So I'll give you context. Materials engineering is pretty broad. So when you think of every possible engineering material, that is probably like materials engineering. For my 6-month COS, I had to go to a construction company. I worked with them on aluminum composite panels. By the time I was in my final year, I was sure that my focus was biomaterials, so materials for biomedicine. And so I was building orthopedic implants for my final year thesis. And when I looked back, it felt to me like the 6 months I spent working in a construction company, acquiring experience along this, would have probably been more useful if I managed to make that decision earlier. I feel like we need to support the education before the COS program to be directional. So if we now say that we have a partnership with the garage where these people are coming in to spend their COS time there, it's now more functional, it's now more useful to them because there is clarity that this is what they are coming to do compared to a world where students are clueless at the time they are involving themselves in COS. The argument for why they are clueless is that they go in and they do a bit of everything in a way that allows them to just sort of figure out what they want to do. But what that means is that even though they now know a bit of everything, they still end up with no experience in the one thing they want to do by the time they are graduates, which means that they don't even qualify to be trainees when it comes to industry. I feel like from an industry perspective, it's also expensive because companies now have to invest, thousands of dollars to do the enablement that they should have, already had the academics do for them, during programs like, COS. But generally, I'm not a big fan of the current design of how university education works.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's a fundamental systemic problem in actually how it's built because there are similar systems like ICOR in the US, for instance. Every university, the way it's built fundamentally is to promote entrepreneurship. So what is the fundamental makeup of all of these things? And then it's going to help. Tracy, I have a bipartite question for you. The first part is on inclusiveness. And I think it's something that we've not spoken about a lot, especially in the Southeast. You specialize in inclusive pedagogy, basically deliberate design of learning for every child, right? Including those with different needs, especially able. But, if we think about the Southeast, overcrowded classrooms, underpaid and undertrained teachers, crumbling infrastructure, a child with dyslexia, ADHD, hearing impairment, I feel in Enugu, Ebonyi, any of the Southeast public schools, they are basically on air, they're invincible. You're slapping somebody in a grammar school or a model school because they did not do 1 + 1. You don't know that this person might be dyslexic. You understand? So, a particular question I want you to answer. What are you doing in Cornelia International School specifically about this? And is what you do, is it scalable? Like, if we say, let's adopt it in the Southeast, is that scalable? That's the first part. Now, the second part is I want you to also engage in this honestly. And, because from what you've said, you kind of default to the British way of doing things, right? But the truth is also that the school systems we've inherited, British O-level frameworks, rote examination, they were never designed for Ndibo. It wasn't designed to build sovereign, self-determining people. It was designed for compliant workers that would go and continue doing these things. So, setting principles in Iba boy, in Jepu, going to learn something, coming back eventually, Akurono, all of these things. Is there a use case where we can have a Southeast curricula that takes in some of the fundamental things that make us Ndibo to be part of what forms the bedrock of our education? So that it's not just, let's do Nigerian, British, this thing. Is there a Nigerian, British, Igbo curriculum that could be typified as part of what would help the future people that grow up to have a strong sense of nationalistic pride, a strong sense of what it is that you are as a young person. And I'm sorry that I gave you 2 questions, but please, briefly.
It's all right. Fantastic. So in our school, in my school, Cornelia Schools, we have a fantastic school psychologist, and she knows, oh my God, if you see her reports, she knows these children so well. Even the parents are amazed. So, I think the problem that we have in the Southeast concerning inclusivity is very...
So, sorry, before we go to the problem, what are you doing? Like, you hired a psychologist, was that it? What did Cornelia do for inclusivity?
Yeah, I'm getting there.
Okay.
So first of all, the first point of contact is the parents.
Okay.
Lots of children with special needs don't get help because their parents don't want to admit that they have special needs. Nobody wants to admit that their beautiful child has a special need, and there's nothing wrong with that. So at Cornelia Schools, we try to educate our parents very slowly, very gently on special needs, and we try to make them aware of their child's needs and how they need to act fast.
Okay.
And how important it is to start acting early, for the child's future.
Yeah.
So we have a psychologist on ground. She has sections with the children. She creates learning plans for the children. And I think that, yes, it can be expanded to the whole of the Southeast, but of course, it also has to start from the parents.
Okay.
Once parents are able to admit that, yes, my child needs help, I think it translates. If when there's a need, there's going to be room to solve it.
Yeah.
So parents have to admit, and then the government also has to make provisions, in schools. I don't know, the Ministry of Education is very set in its ways.
Like in Enugu?
Yes.
So this is a call out to the Enugu Ministry of Education. Okay.
It's very set in its ways. And we like to ignore special needs children as if they're a problem that needs to go away. But the truth is that these children, they're going to grow up and they'll become members of our society. They're not going to disappear. And then in the future, you have people with like ADHD, dyslexia, that has never been addressed, and they're like part of us, and they're wondering, oh, this person can't fend for themselves. I know parents are scared that their children won't be able to fend for themselves if they have special needs, but that's exactly why they need to address it. So yes, I think there's a use case for it to be addressed as a whole in the Southeast.
Okay.
Then secondly, on how Igbo traditions can be...
Ideals and traditions, yeah.
So first of all, in Igbo society, learning has always been practical. That's why we have, like you said, the apprenticeships. The apprenticeships have always been like a practical learning course.
Yeah.
Where the master is constantly monitoring, looking at his apprentice. Are you doing this well?
Yeah.
Are you selling to customers? Correcting. That's something that could be applied to our educational system.
Okay.
That close monitoring. Then there's also this master-apprentice relationship that I feel we could model, where the apprentice reveres the master.
Okay.
Now, students don't respect teachers.
Oh.
And it's not just students. Parents don't respect teachers. And, it's funny because when you look at the master-apprentice relationship, you see, before you take your child to a master to learn a trade, you bring cartons of malt.
Yeah.
Bring this.
Okay.
Tell
Okay.
them, please, oh. If your child comes to complain, oh, this guy is shy, you'll be like, just listen to him, it's for your good. But we don't emulate that with teachers. It's just whatever.
True.
Then another thing is how in Igbo communities, leaders pay close attention to what's happening in the community. And are able to call out, like there's this constant monitoring that might not exist in schools right now. In schools these days, leaders separate themselves from
the daily running around.
The daily run. Like, I don't like that at all. Like, I like to be, as a leader, as a school leader, I like to be involved. as a school leader, you
Might
should.
that be micromanaging? Sorry to interrupt.
It's not micromanaging. It's just that if as a school leader, yes, if as a school leader you enter the classroom once in a while, you're able to understand the problems that are in the classroom.
Yeah.
Do you understand? So these are the things that I feel we could incorporate from Igbo culture: monitoring, practicality,
Respect.
and respect. Very important, because these days parents don't even, like what Alex was saying, he was talking about how teachers are paid poorly. The truth is that parents, I mean, there are poor people that need to go to school at the end of the day. Some of them, their parents don't. There's some families that you hear that their father said, I'm not paying school fees for you. Go and find what you're doing. And this is a trickle-down effect, trickles down to the teachers. And what are we going to say? Oh, people that don't have money shouldn't go to school.
Yeah.
You know, so this is why sometimes in a lot of situations, because if we're being honest, most Nigerians are poor. In a lot of situations, teachers are paid poorly because this is what we can afford as a country.
That makes sense.
So yes.
That makes sense. Thank you so much. And Tracy, thank you for also, Iba Boy, it's apprenticeship. And I think in tech, we've already tried to figure that out with our internships.
Yeah.
But I see something that we can also leverage in educational systems. And then, that whole reward of the teacher is in heaven thingy. It makes us outsource respect to God. So that when you die and go to heaven, with all that respect that you didn't get here, you're going to get it eventually. So that it makes sense. Uche, I'm going to come to you. And for me, I don't know, it might be an uncomfortable idea, but like the most educated Igbo people, the professors, the doctors, the commissioners, the business leaders, the vast majority do not send their children to public schools. In fact, if I ask everybody on this panel, would you send your child to public school? Most likely you would say no. In fact, a lot of the ideal is that I went to a public school, so my child does not go to a public school, right? They send them to private schools or they send them abroad. In fact, they have, in effect, opted out of the public education system. And in America, the public education system is pretty sound. It's pretty swell. In fact, most people want to put their kids in the zones around them. So, but in doing this, they've removed their voices, their urgency, and their lobbying power in the reform. So it's now, public university is a poor school for poor people. And poor people historically do not have the voice. You understand? So because if one or two rich people are not there, they cannot go and lobby. They cannot go and call their friend that is the Commissioner of Education to help them to fix this, right? It's the single biggest barrier to education improvement in Southeast Nigeria. Not funding, not curriculum, not infrastructure, but the fact that the people with the most power to fix it have the least personal stake. All this is what discussing. You don't have to put your child in a public school. Alex doesn't have to put his child in public school, but you're still advocating. But do you believe that away from infrastructure, away from funding, the fact that your skin is not just in the game, like there's nothing that makes you to push these things because, is this crisis of the elites, are they abandoning this and masquerading as an educational problem? That's what I wanted to talk about.
That's a very, very deep question, I must say. That's a very, very deep question. Now, while I reflect on the depth of that question, let me quickly just piggyback on what Tracy mentioned.
Yeah.
The poor remuneration of teachers is a global issue. It's not just in Nigeria. As a matter of fact, in America, in North America generally, North America, the average teacher earns about 25% less of what their counterparts earn in other spheres of life. About 25% less. In Nigeria, it's way higher than that, we know. But it's actually a global pandemic. And that's also one of the reasons why this year we are rolling out a program called Teachers Debate League, where we are bringing teachers together to come and compete. And because we believe that we need to begin to reward teachers. And this is a call to every other person.
Sorry, which is also something, Alex, shout out to you. In the Olympiad, teachers became millionaires because their students did well, which is something I also want to point out.
Fantastic. In our program last year, actually, we gave each teacher 200,000 naira. Your student won. We gave you 200,000 naira. This year, and last year, they complained a lot. They said that because we give millions of naira to students. So they say, you give out all this money to the students. What about us? So we said, fantastic. This year, we are going to organize a competition
for you,
just for teachers. So come and win your own millions.
Okay.
Now, to the question you asked about whether or not it's a a case of them not having a skin in the game. I'd like to start by saying that I invest heavily in Abakaliki because I live in Abakaliki. Whenever I'm in Nigeria, I live in Abakaliki. I have a space in Abakaliki. That's where I stay. And I've been to different parts of Nigeria. I have a space in quite a number of places in Nigeria. And whenever I go to those places, I rarely spend more than a week. I go back to Abakaliki. So I need to invest in Abakaliki because I live there. Because that's my base. That's where I grew up. I'm from Ebonyi State. So I want to invest there. I have a stake there. One of the greatest challenges we have in Nigeria is that we have a system, just as you said, where those who have the power to make things happen are not putting their kids into this system of education. They don't have a skin in the game. Most of them, in fact, it did not start today. When I was in secondary school, most of my teachers did not have their students in urban model secondary school. They had their children in other private schools. Now, is there a possibility that the federal government can make a policy that if you are a government functionary, that your child is not allowed to go to any school that is not a public school? The day we have that across different parts of Africa, that day our school system will become better. And I say it very seriously because it's a matter we need to address, except we don't want to address the issue. The day we decide, the day we mandated that every government functionary must have their child in a public school, that day we will stop talking and start acting. When we say that we are constructing model schools across different parts of Nigeria, across different parts of the Southeast, what do we mean by that? We say we are constructing technical schools. What do we mean by that? Have you gone to a technical school in Southeast Nigeria before?
No.
What you see there are tools that were meant for the 1960s. You rarely see computers there. And the ones that have computers that still operate on Macintosh.
Wow.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And the reason is because their children are not there. When you travel to different parts of the world, you see their kids there, especially at the basic education level.
Yeah.
The primary school level and the secondary school level. The university is better, significantly better. In fact, some of our politicians have their children in Nigerian public universities.
Yeah.
The ones who cannot get their children to Covenant University, because the fact of the matter remains that apart from a handful of private universities,
not a lot of them.
Not a lot of them can compete with an average federal school.
Yeah.
A federal school like Ifunai. Hello, I have to start from there. A federal school like University of Nigeria and Nsukka. A federal school like OAU, the Great Ife and the rest of. So not a lot of private universities can compete with those ones. So the incentive to send their kids there still remains.
Yeah.
But when you come to the basic school level, primary and secondary school, most of them do not send their kids there. And let me mention that it has not always been so.
Yeah, I know.
There was a time when I went to urban model secondary school, things had started to go bad at the time.
Yeah.
We
started flying out.
Yeah, we started flying out and all that. But we were still good.
Yeah, you guys excelled.
We were still radically brilliant. We're just radically brilliant young people. Like at the time, if you wrote what we called common entrance examination, if you performed excellently, I think to perform excellently, then you had to get 31 and above. You were posted to study at Urban.
Yeah.
You were posted to Urban Model Secondary School. If you studied less than 31, you were posted to other schools, which I would not mention.
I would like to add that I went to Babcock University, and I had this lecturer. May he rest in peace. He's late now, and he told me that all his siblings are in the UK because he was the first child, and when he was going to school, it was like a thing of pride to study in Nigeria.
Yeah.
So as the first child, his parents were like, "Oh, like we have to relocate, but you are going to stay back and study here because it was something to be proud of."
That's a crazy punishment.
Now it's a punishment. I agree. We used to be a thing of pride. Raymond, I want you to speak on this briefly because when UcheChukwu mandates people, I saw your dissent, and after that, Alex, I also wanted to speak a little bit about this because you're somebody that doesn't have to, but yet you still do that. So briefly, please.
So I agree that I would love to see a world where all public officials, did that. But of course, I'm also I think that at the point where you start mandating parents to enroll their children in specific schools, we are tiptoeing very closely to the territory of impeding on basic freedoms, yeah?
Oh no, it's not saying parents, it's saying political.
Political people, that if you're in
But they
office.
are parents.
No, but it makes sense. If you want to serve the people, you have to comply.
So if I feel it's simple, do well in that school so that your child. You
have put me in a terrible position.
And when
you're defending
I have
politicians.
to defend the Nigerian politicians.
Raymond, when we talk about freedom,
Yeah.
we need to be honest with ourselves about the things we can afford as Africans.
Yeah.
There are certain liberties we cannot afford.
We've not gotten to that point yet.
There are certain things that America allows today that America did not allow in the 1960s.
Absolutely.
Because of where they were.
We were
as
having
a country.
Yeah,
and they were very democratic at the time.
Yeah.
Where we are now as a country, they say that desperate times call for desperate measures. There strikes a tide in the affairs of the people when the moment calls for decisive political action.
Yeah.
That moment for Nigeria and across Africa is now.
It's now.
Raymond, continue defending the politicians.
So we were having a conversation just before the show about liability. The thing that leaves me scratching my head with all of this is that it is justified, like you say, when there is urgency and when this action can translate to the outcomes that we want. But that only happens if we assume that every public official is liable for improving public education. I mean, imagine someone, again, you remember that, let's say within a place like this country, like Enugu State, for example, most of these commissioners, most of these people have different portfolios.
Yeah.
What you sound like is you're saying that a random commissioner of health is mandated to penalize their children or put their children in a dysfunctional system just because they work in government. I like the idea of it because I'm a hater, right? I just cannot see it through. I just cannot see how this immediately translates to our systems being better.
Tracy, briefly.
I think it translates so because a commissioner of health can make policies that affect students in school.
Okay.
A commissioner of land can decide to collaborate with the Ministry of Education.
Yeah, give them free land to
and it's
build
like,
better schools.
And it helps because we know that most politicians, they compete for completely selfish reasons. But if, there were all these things, and as a politician, you had to look at all these things that you had to sacrifice, and then you still decide that I want to become a politician, then we know that, you have something to do in that position that you're vying for.
And two things quickly. Number one, you talked about a dysfunctional system. Why should they penalize their children? Why is this system dysfunctional? It's because they are not doing what they are supposed to do.
In the game.
If these politicians, everything rises and falls on leadership. I said that before. Yeah. If these politicians summon the political will to solve the problems we have in our schools, they will not be dysfunctional anymore. And what will happen is that they will feel very comfortable putting their kids there because it is no longer dysfunctional. Then number two, we need to also define what being a public servant means.
Yeah.
Being a public servant literally means being a public servant. It means doing things for the interest of the people, not for your personal interest. And that's why you don't use a political office for personal gain. Then number three, finally.
You said two things, Uche.
Okay, fine. I studied
2.5. Let's call it 2.5.
Okay, to wrap it up, 2.5. When we talk about different portfolio, there is something called checks and balances.
Okay.
That's why we have the different arms of government.
Yeah.
That's also why we have different portfolios. If I know as a commissioner for health that I will have to put my children in a public school, and I see you as the commissioner for education not doing your job,
I'll report it to the governor.
Bro, I'll be the first person to penalize you before the public even begin to raise an outcry.
Raymond?
Again,
still on defending the politicians. That way.
Please stop saying that. So I think that the problem is that we've probably exaggerated what these people can actually do in reality, right? Within, you've spoken about political will, with the system of government that we run, political will is like a funnel and it trickles down from the top of the executives, right? I have no problem with saying hold, the governors, for example, are the chief security officers for their states. They're the chief health officers. They're the chief everything.
Yeah.
We are saying hold these people responsible for, healthcare, for education, for everything. I'm fine with that. When you look, when it comes down to like other public officials, there's usually a ceiling on the things that they can achieve. I'm not making an argument for them. I think that we should find ways to hold them accountable within the confines of what it is they can influence. What that looks like for me is the Minister of Health, being mandated to only use public hospitals. It looks like the Minister of Defense being mandated to live in,
in Ababa, for instance.
right? It looks like the Minister or the Commissioner for Transportation being required to use public transportation.
Yeah.
In all of those worlds, they have skin in the game because they're being held accountable for the things that they can immediately influence.
I think it's valid. I'm going to stop you, but I think it's valid. I think we're saying hold politicians accountable,
right,
but we're saying hold it based on their portfolio.
No.
And I know that
there's
a transferability, but we're saying let's start from the osmosis. Let's start from what we can do to what we can get. Alex, because of our time, I want you to also weigh in on this because of the skin in game. But my major question for you is this: if Ali Igbo is going to be great, truly great in the 21st century, not the way we mythologize it in the 1960s, but great in a way that the next generation can live inside, what does the educational system of 2040 need to look like? What kind of Igbo child are we trying to build? What do they know and what can they do? Who do they become, sir? That's my final question for you.
Sorry, I missed you a bit. Can you come back again with the question?
I said, first of all, a little bit of context. What we're discussing was, people don't have skin in the game. That's why public secondary schools and primary schools are like this. Your child, as a politician, is not going there. So we can't even advocate. People advocating from outside the system. It's like an Alex went to this school and saw how bad it was and raised alarm. Not that, my child is here and this was happening. And Uche is saying that every politician's child must go to a public school. If not, it's not going to make sense. So I want you to briefly talk about that. But my main question, if you have time, is if the Igbo land, if Ali Igbo is going to be truly great in the 21st century, what does the education system of 2040 or 2050 need to look like? What kind of Igbo child are we trying to build? Very briefly because of our time.
So I've actually listened to everyone. I listened to the debates talking about having the skin in the game. That is absolutely true. If your child does not attend the public schools, there's no, politics is all about interest.
Yeah.
If your child is not in public schools, it's impossible for you to actually drive a change, especially politicians, right? There's no reason why they should do it. So they can just maybe do one brick and mortar stuff, take pictures, make noise. But the truth of the matter is that they're absolutely not interested in the actual education. Because, building buildings is not education. Education is the actual learning. You can learn under the tree and get a fantastic education. So it mustn't be all those things. So that is very important. For me, the future for the Southeast is global dominance. I'm looking at a workforce that competes with China, that competes with Singapore. I'm looking at the workforce because you can see all these people are killing themselves, Middle East and the rest. And very soon now, the core focus will now start driving into Africa. Who is going to absorb them? That is the Southeast. This is what I'm seeing. And education is not a joke. Education is not something. One of the reasons why you see that I barely complain is because I have lived enough in Nigeria to realize that complaint never changes anything. We need to be able to cause your own part and keep pushing. And by the time you keep pushing, you just see that a lot more people will start aligning. Even in technical education, there's something else that we're probably going to roll out very soon. We talked about revamping the apprenticeship education. We're going to run an experiment, and it will be at a scale that people have never seen before. And as you will see, because we are merging a lot of things from the Ausbildung in Germany and some other things that we are looking at, we are going to bring out something that will be so awesome. This is not government. This is still people who are trying to redefine the next pathway, right? So, unfortunately, we have already lost the government in terms of education. Maybe we may be fortunate to be able to get maybe somebody that can actually start participating in where we are going to, because we can't wait for anybody anymore, right? We have to do this because, like I always say, we're not going to be here forever. Nigeria, the Southeast, right, must still continue to move on. What Americans are enjoying today, what the British people are enjoying today is the foundations of their forefathers.
Yeah.
We have generations that are going to come after us. It is the foundation that we are laying today. Tomorrow it will become the greatest workforce in the world. Maybe we may not even be here when those things finally actualize.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they will look back in time that the foundation that we are taking today is basically what they are going to build on. And for me, that is the biggest fulfillment.
Yeah.
And that is the part that we are thinking about now. No more what we are going to achieve in 1 or 2 years. One of the things I've tried to do is, early before I even started the intervention and all the work, I focused a lot on business. Sometimes it's always good to have a clear interjection between profit and purpose.
Yeah.
I focused so much on profit, built a very big business, and then now I'm building a lot more focus on purpose, at least because if you don't do it, it's very easy to be distracted. It is very easy to be bought over. It's very easy to just make mistakes. But if you have a clear path in terms of profit, there's no amount of money you can ever give me that will make me to do the wrong thing.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible, right? Yeah, one is that you also have to conquer greed, because these are the gaps that we usually have. Sometimes some people start well, all of a sudden you see them start deviating wrongly.
Yeah.
So, but we know my goal is very clear. My 10 years old roadmap is super clear. And it's something that we have to achieve. What we're going to do to achieve it. That's why I notice that the level of energy discussions about education, I love it so much. I notice that everybody is speaking up from different things and different places. I so much love it because every single conversation is tilting towards the same goal. It is not a joke, right? And we have to achieve it. I rely zero on the government. What I need from the government is just don't give us trouble.
Yeah.
If we need approval, don't give us money, but don't give us trouble.
Right.
If we need approvals where we need to, please just approve to us. Even in the Olympiad, please just be aware that we are doing this and just let your schools participate. Don't finance us, don't support us, right? If you wish to, that's okay. But even if you do, it doesn't make us do anything differently.
Yeah.
But allow us, you understand? Because at the end of the day, this is something that by the time you get out of the government, by the time you get old, this is something that you are going to benefit from. So the children is the most important thing. And for me also, why I'm also trying to focus a lot more on the children is that the children are malleable.
Yeah.
You can easily fix the younger
Shape
ones,
them.
but the adults are almost impossible to fix. They have been made. So focusing on them is wasting of time. There's also something quickly I want to highlight on. One of the reasons why you see a lot of gaps in like our high-stake exam, WAEC and JAMB, is very simple. The maximum admission in Nigeria per year is 700,000. The people writing WAEC and JAMB is between 1.9 to 2 million every year. So it is a constant that 1.3 million children will never get admission. That's the maximum, and most of the time they never take up to that maximum, right? So some of the things you see are actually orchestrated because everybody cannot get to school. We don't even have the capacity. This is not like the US or the UK. So some of the things we try to suggest, it seems as if they are not hearing. There's nothing they can do. That's why people like MIVA, some of these online universities are trying to now help fill the gaps.
Yeah.
But this is basically what is realistic in this country. Now, JAMB is even introducing a ranking system beyond just their normal ranking, introducing a new form of ranking system, right?
Yeah.
So,
Thank you so much.
we,
Alex, sorry,
Yes.
because of our time, I have to cut you short there. But thank you so much for your closing remarks. And it's something that I think sets the tone of my last question to the rest of the panelists. We've heard from Alex, we've heard from the spirited conversations we've all had today. Respectfully, humanities, sciences, math, Olympiad, early years education, the people in the universities, tech events like Enugu Tech Fest, inclusivity in foundational, these are fruit bombs. But finally, and because we have less than 2 minutes left, 30 seconds each, starting from Raymond, then Joy, Uche, Tracy. If someone watching tonight, a parent, a teacher, a student, Pitamba, anybody takes one thing away from this conversation and acts on it, because remember, we've not only just talked about the problems, we've talked about solutions, we've talked about pathways, we've talked about idealists and realists at the end of the day. But someone takes one thing away from this conversation and acts on it. What would you want that to be, Raymond, quickly?
I think putting every conversation together, I think the most important thing that we need to realize, and anyone needs to realize, is that we can't solve this problem. We have to take incremental steps.
Okay.
So if we wait until we have all the means and all the resources to fix these problems across the board, we'll never be able to solve it.
But I need you to personalize it. What particular step do you want somebody to take?
Infrastructure.
Okay. We have for government now.
Yeah, we have a $10 billion infrastructure gap.
Okay.
We cannot fill it. We have to start making investments slowly and incrementally in providing infrastructure across educational institutions in the region if we are going to get anywhere with regards to solving this problem.
I hear you on infrastructure. Joy, one thing someone should take away from this conversation and act on it, what would you want that to be?
Basically, what we can take away is that we don't have a skill problem, and we need to factor in that our skill as the skill we make our students, acquire, they have to, find a way to link it to gainfulness. All right. So we don't have a skill problem. We just need to bridge the gaps between gainfulness and then what we are able to, what these people are able to give to the society we are building.
So sorry to push back, Joy. Sorry to push back. I want you to phrase it as an action item. Now that we know we don't have a skill problem, what action should somebody take in ensuring that, like in doing this particularly? Just give it to me from an action perspective.
Okay. First off is to take the step towards what do we have? Because we have different schools, all right? We have different people, working towards things. How do we support those people? Okay. How do we now amplify what they are doing? Like we have Alex doing what he's doing, how do we amplify it to make sure that it gets to the underserved regions? Because one thing is, serving the 10% that already have some level of access, and then the rest of the population that are really underserved.
Yeah.
All right. So first of all, we have a lot going on, from the festival side and from different programs coming up and different schools offering different things. How do we now make our people know that these things are going on? So we take the steps to amplify. Yes, basically.
That makes sense. Ochman? By the way, Uche identifies as an Afro-optimist. He believes that the black man can make it at the end of the day, which I appreciate. So what is the action that you want to the black man that you're so optimistic about?
I would say do something. Do something. If you cannot build a school, buy a textbook for a child. If you can't buy a textbook, buy a pen for a child. If you can't buy a pen, teach a child for free. If you can teach a child, take a child to school. Encourage the parents to send the child to school. Raymond said something very significant, that solving the problem is not something that should be left for the government alone. It's something that needs to be a concerted effort. Every one of us needs to be involved in it. So wherever you are, in your own little capacity, especially those who are not in government, let's do something. Let's stop sitting around and complaining about the problems.
Finally, Tracy, one final thing.
So I believe that education for all should truly be education for all.
Yeah.
Not education for smart people or for rich people or for people with special needs. So the government needs to consider everybody in planning the educational system of the country, no matter what country. So
the government plan, 5 people, 1 conversation, over 100 uncomfortable truths, and somewhere inside, a path towards progress. And I want to leave you with something that has stayed with me since we started preparing for tonight. There's something that in the forward of your report, Raymond, the question is not whether students are ready. They have already shown us they are. The question is, are we ready for them? This is the question that should follow every person in this room, every teacher, every policymaker, every parent, every young person on DSTV, GoTV, YouTube, everywhere. Are we ready for this generation? Are we building the structures funding the infrastructure, making the policy decisions that say to this generation, we see what you're trying to do, we see what you're building, and we're going to make room for it. Ali Igbo has never been great because of what government gave us. That's something they say all the time. We've always been great because of what we built with our own hands, with our own minds, our own refusal to be defined by what has been withheld from us. Tonight, we named what is withholding us. We've named what is holding us back. This is the beginning. My name is Eliezer Aja. Thank you so much for watching Afia Talks. Good night.